Is she the biggest draw in women's tennis right now?
Yes.
Is she bigger than Sabalenka? Is she bigger than Coco?
Dude, it's crazy. She's having the same effect that Fonseca was having, like, on the men's side last year in Miami.
It's like Fonseca, but I think it's bigger than Fonseca.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Like, the Doha, like, crowds were insane for her last week.
If she wins a slam, it would be like one of the biggest things in the world.
Yeah,
correct.
She's definitely one to watch, obviously because she's so good, but just for the atmosphere. You want to tune into her matches just to see what it's like on the court.
There's got to be like a little jealousy maybe from some of the women, that girls coming in, she's not top 10, biggest star in the world.
Nobody expected the tennis world to panic over a 20-year-old ranked outside the spotlight just months ago. But that is exactly what happened after Eala dismantled Coco Guaff and suddenly forced the biggest names on tour to start looking over their shoulders. The crowd energy exploded, the analysts scrambled for explanations, and even Aryna Sabalenka could not ignore the storm building around this rising star. But here is the real question everyone is whispering now. Is Eala about to become the most dangerous player in women's tennis?
I saw the other day with Eala, you know, that's been a talk, and which is understandable. You know, there's some players coming from respective countries, like she's coming from Philippines, which is now a big deal. You know, she's been the biggest ever, you know, tennis player from that country, which is a big country, and there's a big interest. So things like that happen. I mean, it's you could argue that it was, you know, maybe a poor schedule, and maybe they could schedule him on a bigger court. Yes, but again, she's so young and she's just coming.
If you are just as excited about Eala's incredible rise as we are, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next chapter of her journey. The moment Eala crushed Coco Guaff, something unusual happened across the tennis world. The scoreline itself was shocking, but the real shock came from the reaction inside the locker room. Suddenly, conversations that once revolved around Aryna Sabalenka's dominance or Coco Gauff's rise began shifting toward a completely different name.
Let me tell you, I'm definitely not normally like this when I lose.
No.
But this was definitely a special circumstance. I remember the last couple of match points, I was able to save a match point, you know.
Yeah.
And I just tried to prolong the match as long as I could because I knew that this is where I wanted to be. And then after I sat down, after the handshake, I looked up and there's so many flags of the Philippines and so many Filipinos. It was past midnight, they were there to stay, and I had just had the best run of my career.
A 20-year-old player from the Philippines, who not long ago was buried deep in the rankings, had forced the entire sport to reconsider its hierarchy. And for the first time, even the biggest stars seemed to realize that a new and unpredictable threat had arrived.
And also the challenge put up by Eala.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was a great match, and honestly, I think like Iga didn't really start well. She was missing a lot, but then she kind of like found her rhythm and she started playing much better, and she put a lot of pressure on Eala and got the win. Yeah, it was a great match from Iga, kind of like nice comeback after like really tough start.
Yeah.
And also it's kind of like really far, like talking about the final, and we need to make it to the final, and then we can talk about that. I mean, of course, I'd like to play another final against her. It's always kind of like busters, and it's always like really cool to play, and hopefully really cool to watch for people.
The tennis world loves its narratives, and for a long time, the story was simple. Sabalenka represented raw power and relentless aggression, while Gauff symbolized the next generation ready to inherit the spotlight. Fans and analysts assumed that the future of women's tennis would revolve around those familiar names.
Congratulations on the victory. Of course, no, this is not how you wanted to move forward, but I thought the first set, that first half a set, there were some very competitive points there, breaks back and forth. How did you sort of surmise the first few games?
I was definitely a little nervous. It was a big stadium and of course a big opponent, and yeah, I was really motivated, super excited to play the match. So I think those back and forths were really intense for me, and I'm happy that I was able to get some of them.
Then Eala stepped onto the court and quietly began rewriting the script, one match at a time, until the moment arrived when the tennis establishment could no longer pretend they had not seen her coming. What made the moment even more astonishing was how recently Eala had been treated like an afterthought. Just 18 months earlier, she was ranked outside the top 100, sitting around number 140 in the world rankings. Most casual tennis fans would have struggled to recognize her name. She entered major tournaments as a wild card, which in tennis language is essentially a polite way of saying that expectations are close to zero. Wild cards are often invitations for hopeful prospects, not players expected to shake the foundations of the sport. Yet something about Eala's trajectory never followed the traditional pattern. Stage. What happened next stunned everyone watching. In the early rounds, she defeated Madison Keys, a player known for explosive power and years of elite experience. Many observers dismissed the result as a surprising but temporary upset, the kind of result that sometimes appears during chaotic early rounds of big tournaments. But then something even more remarkable happened. Eala followed that victory by beating Iga Świątek, who at the time was widely considered the most dominant force in women's tennis. The win sent shockwaves through the tournament because defeating one top star could be explained as a lucky day, but taking down two elite players in the same week forced analysts to reconsider what they were witnessing.
How do we help Alex Eala to be best placed for the Pinoy win? For both players, the opportunity is significant. Victory would bring 215 ranking points, prize money of just over $193,000, and the chance to face either qualifier Talia Gibson or 7th seed Jasmine Paolini for a place in the semi-final. Opportunities like this do not come around very often, even for players ranked inside the top 30. But for Alex Eala and Linda Noskova, just 20 and 21 years old, this match represents another important step in two very promising careers.
By the end of that unforgettable run in Miami, Eala had reached the semifinals of a WTA 1000 event and achieved something no Filipino player had accomplished before. She became the first woman from the Philippines to reach that stage in a tournament of that magnitude, and suddenly her name was appearing everywhere across tennis media. But even that moment did not fully capture the larger story unfolding behind the scenes. The crowds were noticing something long before the rankings reflected it. During Eala's matches in Miami, entire sections of the stadium filled with Filipino flags, turning routine tournament sessions into something closer to a national celebration. Tournament organizers quietly confirmed that attendance numbers for her matches were rising beyond expectations, and the atmosphere inside the arena began to resemble the energy of a concert rather than a typical tennis match. Fans were not just watching her play. They were showing up in numbers that surprised the sport itself momentum through the rest of the season. Over the following months, Eala's confidence grew with every tournament appearance. She began stringing together deep runs and gradually climbed past the rankings that once seemed distant. By the end of 2025, she had broken into the top 50 and captured her first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara, a milestone that confirmed her Miami run had never been a fluke. The victories were impressive, but the commercial impact might have been even more revealing.
Really didn't want to win this way, but this is still a really big moment for me to be able to play on Stadium 1 of Indian Wells and against such a great competitor. I'm really grateful to be here and I'm super happy. Yeah.
Also, Alexandra, to the Filipino community, you are such a role model, and I'm sure you want to say something to your Filipino fans as well.
Yes, mabuhay mga kababayan, nandito tayo sa California!
Nike quickly recognized the magnitude of what was happening. The global sports giant signed Eala as an ambassador and featured her prominently at their headquarters in Oregon, where portraits celebrating her heritage and national identity appeared across the walls. It was a symbolic moment that signaled something bigger than a simple sponsorship deal. Tennis was witnessing the rise of a player who represented an entire nation's passion. The Philippines, with more than 100 million people, suddenly had a star on the global tennis stage. Supporters followed every match with intense loyalty, and social media exploded with highlights, analysis, and celebrations whenever Eala stepped onto the court. By early 2026, the momentum had become impossible to ignore. At the Dubai Championships in February, Eala delivered another performance that forced analysts to reconsider her ceiling. She faced 8th-seeded Jasmine Paolini, a player firmly established among the sport's elite, pushed her ranking even higher, and when the new rankings were released on February 23, 2026, Alex Eala officially became the highest-ranked Filipino woman in the 47-year history of the WTA Tour. She climbed to world number 31, rewriting her nation's tennis record books in the process. Then came the moment that raised the stakes even further. When the Indian Wells draw was released, Eala appeared as the 31st seed, marking the first time she had ever entered a WTA 1000 event with a seeded position.
Vibes. You talk about this being a global sport. How about the Filipino fans? For Alex Eala has become an absolute phenomenon on the courts. This is an early Verizon vantage point on TC Live. Everywhere she goes, she gets swarmed by her fans, Coco.
Swarmed is right, Steve. And look, this is the great thing. The security guard fumbled the rope, and that was almost the worst part of the event. But you can get as close and personal with your favorite.
For many players, a seeding is simply a technical advantage that protects them from facing top opponents in early rounds. For Eala, it symbolized a shift in perception. She was no longer a surprising underdog. She was now considered one of the tournament's serious competitors. The draw also revealed a potential third-round clash with Coco Guaff, a matchup that instantly caught the attention of fans and analysts. Gauff had long been viewed as one of the sport's brightest young superstars, and the idea of facing Eala at that stage created a fascinating narrative. At that point, even the most skeptical experts began circling Eala's name on their brackets. The tennis conversation exploded online. YouTube channels began dissecting her rise, podcasts scrambled to analyze her style, and analysts who had previously overlooked her were suddenly trying to explain how such a dramatic ascent had gone unnoticed. One moment in particular captured the shift in perception. During an episode of the Nothing Major podcast, former ATP player Steve Johnson made a statement that ignited debate across tennis media. Johnson, a veteran who spent more than a decade competing against the yet Johnson's reasoning was difficult to dismiss. He pointed to the crowds, the atmosphere, and the undeniable energy surrounding Eala's matches. He explained that when she walked onto the court, the reaction from fans felt different from the typical response even for top players. The stadium energy felt closer to a rock concert than a routine tennis match.
Confession to make. Every time someone asks, who should I be watching on the WTA? Who should I be excited about? You are one of the first names that comes out of my mouth.
Thank
it is.
you.
We were all so captivated with your run in Miami, what you did last year, this sort of meteoric rise that you've had. What's been the coolest part for you?
It's really hard to pick. I think, just being able to follow the calendar for me is an amazing part, because I now have the ranking where the calendar kind of dictates where I go.
Coming from someone who had spent 12 years traveling the professional tour, the observation carried significant weight. Johnson had shared locker rooms with champions and rising stars throughout his career, and he understood the difference between hype and genuine momentum. His conclusion was simple. Eala was not just attracting attention because of a few impressive wins. She was generating excitement on a scale that the sport rarely sees from someone so early in their career. Meanwhile, the numbers from previous tournaments were supporting that claim. At events where Eala appeared on the schedule, ticket demand increased, and television viewership from Southeast Asia surged dramatically. The combination of competitive results and commercial influence created a powerful narrative. For decades, tennis followed a predictable formula. Eala's story seemed to reverse that order entirely. Her fan army had arrived before the major trophies. Millions of supporters were already invested in her journey, cheering through every match and celebrating every milestone. Reigning powerhouse of women's tennis. The image of the two players training side by side captured a fascinating contrast between established dominance and emerging challenge. Sabalenka represented the current standard of excellence, a player known for overwhelming opponents with relentless power. Eala represented the unpredictable newcomer who had suddenly started beating players that once seemed untouchable.
is how far she can go. I think these courts will suit her game a lot better because everything gets slowed down for the lefty to be able to start working the angles, working that forehand line. But she is in that killer section of where all those big hitters are that Chris mentioned earlier. She's got to get through some big players to be able to even contend in round of 16.
Yeah, but I think that this fanfare that she's been getting over the past few months can cause some players to do some incredible things. We saw it in Australia. There were mobs and lines of people to make it to her side courts. Hopefully, we're able to get her in a big court so everyone is able to stay safe around the grounds.
Inside the tennis world, moments like that practice session sparked quiet conversations. Could this young player actually disrupt the established order of the tour? Those questions grew louder after the match that sent shockwaves through the sport. When Eala defeated Coco Guaff in devastating fashion, the result forced even the biggest skeptics to pay attention. Gauff had built a reputation as one of the most complete young players in the game, combining speed, defense, and mental resilience. Watching Eala overpower her so convincingly created a new reality. Suddenly, the possibility that she could challenge the very best players in the world no longer seemed hypothetical. It looked inevitable. For Sabalenka and the other top stars, that development introduced an unfamiliar feeling. Dominant champions are accustomed to preparing for known rivals, opponents whose strengths and... However, the journey was not without setbacks. Earlier in Dubai, Eala had faced Coco Guaff and suffered a crushing defeat, losing 6-0 in the opening set before falling 6-2 in the second. The scoreline revealed a clear gap between the two players at that time. Instead of avoiding the topic afterward, Eala addressed it with remarkable honesty during her press conference.
Challenge ahead is likely to be her toughest of the tournament so far. Her earlier opponents, Rastremska, of course we remember, and Coco Guaff, both struggled with consistency and confidence during their matches. Eala took advantage with smart returning, steady serving, and the ability to stay patient in rallies. Yastremska served 15 double faults and produced 75 unforced errors across 3 sets. Gauff also struggled with her forehand and served 7 double faults before her match ended prematurely.
She acknowledged that the difference in level had been obvious during that match and admitted that she still had ground to cover before consistently competing with the sport's elite players. Yet she also made one statement that revealed her mindset moving forward. She insisted that she was on the right path. 14 days later, she arrived at Indian Wells, carrying the confidence of a seeded player for the first time in her career. The ranking, the victories, and the growing fan support all pointed toward a trajectory that seemed to accelerate with every tournament appearance. Looking back at the sequence of events, the rise appears almost cinematic. A wildcard entry ranked outside the top 100 shocks the tennis world in Miami. The following months bring steady progress, culminating in a title in Guadalajara. A record-breaking ranking for Filipino tennis arrives in early 2026. Nike places her image inside its global headquarters as a symbol of cultural pride. And now the sport's biggest in Miami and Dubai. And if the results continue trending upward, the 2026 season could become the year when the tennis establishment officially recognizes that a new global star has arrived. The next stops on the calendar only add to the anticipation. After Indian Wells comes the return to Miami, where her original breakthrough occurred.
Bear with me because I have a lot to say. I want to say thank you to all the incredible women who have paved the way and who have advocated for themselves and for other women. Among them is Coco. So thank you, Coco, for being an amazing competitor and amazing role model. And I really hope that everything is well and you will recover soon.
Then the tour moves to Europe for the clay court swing through Madrid and Rome, 2 prestigious events that often shape the narrative leading into Roland Garros. Each tournament represents another opportunity for Eala to prove that her rise is not a temporary phenomenon, but the beginning of a lasting presence at the top of the sport. Through every step of this journey, one moment from Dubai continues to capture the emotional connection between Eala and her supporters. For years, Filipino tennis fans dreamed of seeing a player compete at the highest levels of the sport. Now they were watching someone who might do far more than compete. She might dominate. Meanwhile, the fans who believed in her from the beginning are simply enjoying the ride. They filled stadiums before the rankings demanded respect. They celebrated victories before analysts recognized her potential. And they continue to support her as she prepares for the next challenge on the biggest courts in the world. The established champions find a way to halt the momentum before the coronation becomes official. The answer is unfolding match by match, and the entire tennis world is watching closely to see whether this rising star from the Philippines is about to complete one of the most extraordinary breakthroughs the sport has witnessed in years.